Alright. Hey guys, so I was asked to go over a couple problems from section 6.3 involving proportions and then involving similar figures. So let's go ahead and let's get right into it. So on number 9, I know the radicals. Pretty scary. That's usually where you guys get tripped on. Let's go through the normal process. We have one fraction equal to another fraction, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to cross multiply. So when we do that, we get c radical 3 is equal to 2 rad 12. So at this point, I'm not going to do anything with the radicals, and I'm just going to get the variable by itself. So let's go ahead and we're going to divide both sides by radical 3. On this side, easier to see that they cancel each other out. On the right hand side, so what you don't know, or you may not know, is that the radical 12 will simplify and reduce down with the radical 3. Since they both have radicals, I can pretend that they're both underneath the same radical and just simplify the fraction. 12 and 3, so I end up with 2 radical 4. And then that looks a little bit more comfortable, more familiar for us. So we can simplify a square root of 4. And so we end up with c is equal to 4. Okay? So that's how you work out number 9. Moving along over here, this is number 23. And there's a couple different approaches that you can have for this problem. One approach is you can set up a proportion. And then the other approach is to use the common ratio between the two similar figures. And these two values right here, the 3 and the 1.5, make it a little easier to see what the common ratio is. But we're going to do this in two different ways. We're going to do it once using the common ratio and once using solving a proportion. So here's my proportion that I'm going to set up. I see here that I have two values, okay, that correspond to these two sides over here on this larger similar figure. So, and there's different ways you can set it up as long as you're consistent. That's really all that matters. So the way I'm going to set it up is I'm going to go long side with the variable over smaller side, same figure. And as long as you set it up with the smaller figure in that same order, where the sides are corresponding to one another, 3 corresponds to C, and 1.5 corresponds to the same side over here. So as long as you're doing that, you're good. And then you go through the exact same process over here. So let's go ahead. 1.5c is equal to 9. And then we divide by 1.5. C is equal to 6. Okay, so now I know that this side right here, so we write it in different color just so that way it stands out a little bit. C is equal to 6. So it makes it a little more obvious now to see what the common ratio is. So we can see that the common ratio is 2. Okay, so 2 or 0.5 depending on which way that you're looking at it. It doesn't tell you which figure is the pre and the post image. It just gives you two similar figures. So if I'm going from the smaller figure to the larger figure, I'm multiplying everything by 2. 1.5 times 2 gives me 3. 3 times 2 gives me 6. A times 2 gives me 5. So if you work backwards and you think of it as now, okay, I'm dividing by 2 or I'm multiplying by 1/2. 3 times 1/2 gives you 1.5. 6 times 1/2 gives you 3. 5 times 1/2 gives you A. And so 5 times 1/2 gives you 5/2. So A is equal to 2.5. And that's kind of the way that you can solve using the common ratio, is when you see that pattern that's going on, you can set that up. Okay? So now I'm going to move on to the last question that was asked, number 24. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to erase all of this as well. You guys can hit pause. And number 24 involves 2 rectangles. So let's do the best that we can, drawing quickly. And then we have our smaller. Erase, erase. My diagonals are going this way. And we have X, D, 21. And then on the smaller one, we have 3, rad 58. And 7. Okay. So, a couple different ways that we can go about this. One, let's use the common ratio. There's only 2 sides that we have, 2 corresponding sides. That have actual numbers and not variables. 7 and 21. So that means that going from this direction, smaller figure, to the larger figure, we're going to multiply times 3. So my common ratio is 3. And that makes it really easy to go from smaller height, vertical side of 3 to the larger height. Because then all I have to do is just multiply this height by 3 to figure out the larger side. So then that gives me X is equal to 3 times 3, X is equal to 9. So that was me solving using the common ratio. Now we can do another thing where we solve using the proportion, because now I have 2 sides I can set up in order to help me find D. The other thing that you can do, if you notice, it's a right triangle. Okay. This side is also going to be 9. So you could use the Pythagorean theorem as well to find it out, or you could set up a ratio. It's really up to you. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set up a ratio, and I'm going to use the smaller numbers. So I'm going to use my height and my diagonal, my height and my diagonal. So 9 is to 3. Nine is to 3. So I'm setting up my proportion a little different than I did last time. But as long as you're consistent, I went from big figure to small figure. So then I have to go in that same order again for the next corresponding sides. Big figure to small figure. Okay. And then we can go ahead and we can just set this up. So one thing I'm going to do, make things a little bit different, a little easier. I'm going to reduce this fraction. Okay. So I'm going to set this up now as 3 is equal to d over the square root of 58. And then the only thing I have to do in order to get the variable by itself, multiply both sides by square root of 58. And I'm going to leave my answer as that. So d is equal to 3 radical 58. And then that's it. So don't let the square roots intimidate you and scare you. They're just like normal. And treat them as a mixture of numbers and variables. But hopefully that was good for you guys. Hopefully that helped. Hopefully you guys are getting work done during this weird time. Okay. Talk to you guys later. Stay safe. Stay healthy.